My family ignored my efforts, so I made sure they regret it when I became successful. My dad had the microphone in one hand and my childhood like a prop in the other, and he was smiling so wide his cheeks looked painful. The function room's ceiling fan clicked on every third spin, the kind of cheap, stubborn noise you can't unhear once you notice it, and the smell of catered roast chicken sat heavy in the warm air. I stood beside the cake table with a plastic flute of flat champagne, watching my brother's friends lean in with their phones out like they were filming a proposal instead of my parents' special announcement. Dad tapped the mic, got that squeal, laughed, and said, "Before we cut this cake, we've got a little surprise. Our girl has done so well for herself, thanks to us keeping her grounded." He looked right at me like I owed him a cue. My stomach tightened. My fingers slid around the remote in my pocket, the smooth little clicker I'd brought on purpose, and I could feel the heat of it against my skin like a secret. I didn't plan to do it in front of everyone. I swear I didn't. I told myself I could get through one night, smile, clap, eat the dry brownie slice, go home. But then my dad kept talking, building his story brick by brick, the story where I was a late bloomer, where they'd push me to stop wasting time, where my brother was the family's bright future, and I was the one who needed a firm hand. My mom stood behind him nodding, eyes shiny, already preparing her little laugh that always comes right before she says something that sounds sweet but lands like a hook. My brother Kyle, 26, permanently between big things, leaned back in his chair and smirked at me like this was payback for every time I'd refused to spot him money. Dad said, "And because family supports family, she's also got something to say about helping Kyle with his new venture." That was the moment my body went cold in patches. Helping Kyle. Of course. The mic wasn't for me. It was a lever. My dad turned and held the microphone toward my mouth, still smiling, and I felt my jaw clamped shut on instinct. I took the mic anyway. Because the room was watching, because my grandma was there, because I was tired of looking like the difficult one. And I said, "Actually, I do have something to say." I looked down, pulled the remote out, and clicked once. The projector screen behind the cake table lit up, bright and unforgiving. Not the slideshow my mom thought I'd made. Not baby photos with sappy music. A screenshot, big font, a group chat titled Family Red Heart, with my dad's message in bold. "Don't encourage her. She'll never make money with that little hobby." Under it, my mom, "She needs a real job. Let Kyle have the spotlight for once." Under that, Kyle, "Oh, she thinks she's going to be famous." Cringe. The room went so quiet I could hear the ceiling fan click. My dad's smile collapsed like a table with a broken leg. My mom made a sound that was half gasp, half whimper. Kyle sat forward fast, eyes wide, like he couldn't believe his own words were suddenly public. My hand shook around the microphone, but the shaking didn't stop me this time. "Yeah," I said softly into the mic, and my voice sounded strange in the speakers, too loud, too real. "That's my family, everyone. It started years ago, before the projector, before the function room, before my dad decided the best way to control me was to wrap it in applause. I'm the oldest, 31, the responsible one. You know the type. Good grades, quiet kid, doesn't ask for much, learns early that being low maintenance is the only way to be loved without a price tag. Kyle is 5 years younger and has been treated like a weather event his whole life. Unpredictable, disruptive, and everyone else adjusts around him. When I was 17, I worked weekends at a bakery to pay for my own phone and school excursions. Kyle was 17 and figuring himself out, which somehow required my parents buying him new sneakers every month and pretending his detentions were misunderstandings. When I got into uni, my dad said, "Good. Keep your head down." When Kyle dropped out of his first course, my mom said, "He's too smart for the system." Same house, same parents, completely different rules. I've always liked making things, not in a Pinterest way, in a brain that won't switch off way. In high school, I used to design little digital posters for school events because the official ones looked like they were made in 1998, and it bothered me. I learned Photoshop on YouTube in my bedroom with the door shut, headphones in, pretending I wasn't doing anything important because I knew the second my dad decided it wasn't practical, it would become a family joke. At uni, I studied communications, and worked part-time at a logistics company doing boring admin. Then slowly got pulled into their marketing because I could actually write and design without making everything look like a corporate funeral. I loved it. I loved the problem solving. I loved the feeling of making something look right, feel right, communicate something cleanly. I started freelancing on the side, logos, small business menus, social media templates. The money was small at first, but the pride was huge. It was mine. It was the first thing in my life that wasn't about being good enough to earn peace at home. My family treated it like a phase. They didn't say, "We're proud." They said, "When are you getting a real job?" Even while I was paying my own rent in a moldy unit with a shower that went cold after 6 minutes. My mom would look at my laptop and go, your little designs, like I was finger painting. My dad would say, "Don't get ideas above your station," like ambition was a personality flaw. Kyle would ask me to quickly whip something up for his mate's business and then disappear when I mentioned payment, like my time didn't count unless it was free. There's one moment I keep replaying because it's so small and so revealing. I was 24 and I landed my first real client. Like real, an actual company that wasn't my friend's cousin. I'd been awake for 2 nights straight getting the pitch deck right. My eyes were gritty. My wrists hurt from the trackpad. When I got the email saying they'd picked me, I literally sat on the kitchen floor of my unit and laughed because it felt like my body didn't know what to do with relief. I called my mom first. I don't know why I still did that back then. I told her, breathless, "Mom, they picked me. They picked my proposal." There was a pause. Then she said, "That's nice, sweetie." Kyle's car is making a weird noise again. Can you talk to your dad about lending him some money? I remember staring at the wall while she talked, listening to her words, and feeling my face go hot. Not just because she didn't care, but because she didn't even pretend to care. Like my win was background noise. I tried to be forgiving. I told myself they didn't understand my world. I told myself my parents were from a different generation. I told myself Kyle was insecure. I did what I always did. I kept my head down and worked harder. I built my portfolio, took on bigger contracts, got a job at a marketing agency, hated the culture, quit, went full-time freelance. I started doing the boring adult things my dad always acted like I couldn't do. Registering a business name, tracking invoices, paying tax, saving a buffer so one slow month wouldn't wipe me out. It wasn't glamorous. It was spreadsheets and late nights and declining invites because I had deadlines. It was choosing the cheap pasta sauce at Woolies and telling myself it was temporary. And then it started working. Not rich overnight, working, but enough. Enough that I could breathe. Enough that I stopped checking my bank balance with dread. Enough that I could buy a decent laptop without putting it on a payment plan. Enough that I could say no to clients who treated me like I was lucky they'd found me. Enough that I could hire a junior designer part-time because I was drowning and I didn't want to burn out into a husk. The first time my family noticed wasn't when I hit my first big income year. It wasn't when I got featured in a small business magazine. It wasn't when I paid off my uni debt early. They noticed when Kyle wanted something. He was on his third venture by then. Drop shipping. Then crypto. Then brand consulting, which meant asking me to do free work and pretending it was collaboration. This time he wanted to open a little pop-up sneaker resale thing with a mate. He needed cash for stock, for rent, for cash flow. He came to me with his most practiced expression, humble but offended you'd ever doubt him. "Sis," he said, leaning on my kitchen counter like he belonged there, "you're doing pretty well, hey. Can you invest? I'll give you a cut." I asked him for a plan. He laughed. I asked him for numbers. He got irritated. I said no. He called me stingy. My parents backed him, of course. They didn't call it investing. They called it helping. My dad rang me and said, "If you've got money sitting there, why wouldn't you help your brother?" in that tone that makes it sound like I'm hoarding oxygen. I said, "Dad, I work for my money." He replied, "And we work to raise you." That's their favorite exchange rate. Parenting as a loan, my adulthood as repayment. Then the messages started. The guilt ones, the passive ones, the ones wrapped in religious language like that makes it nicer. My mom would send, "Family's all you have in the end." My dad would send, "Disappointed in your attitude." Kyle would send, "Thought you were better than that." And I would sit on my couch, phone in my hand, feeling my chest tighten with that old reflex. Prove you're good, prove you're loving, prove you're worth keeping around. That's when I stopped. Not dramatically. Quietly. I muted the chats. I stopped answering within minutes. I stopped explaining myself like I was on trial. And I started keeping receipts, not because I wanted to destroy them, but because I kept gaslighting myself. Every time I felt guilty, I'd remember the way my mom said, "That's nice," like my win was an interruption. Every time I felt mean, I'd remember Kyle laughing at my request for a business plan. I didn't decide to make them regret it in one big villain monologue. It was more like I slowly stopped cushioning their consequences. My parents would call asking me to spot Kyle's rego. I'd say no. They'd ask me to just quickly redesign Kyle's logo because his customers were confused. I'd say no. They'd ask me to cover a bill because Dad's hours were down. I'd ask for specifics, for a plan, for accountability. They hated that. They hate when I act like my help has conditions because they're used to treating my competence like it's family property. Then the success became visible. Not because I brag, but because life leaks. A client tagged me in a post that went viral. A local radio station asked me to talk about small business marketing. My agency name popped up on a billboard for a regional campaign, and suddenly my work wasn't just on my laptop. It was in the world where my family could see it without choosing to. People started messaging my mom, "Isn't your daughter the one on the radio?" And that's when the tone shifted. Suddenly my mom was telling relatives, "She's always been creative." Suddenly my dad was saying, "We raised her to be resilient." Suddenly Kyle was saying, "Yeah, my sister's in marketing. She can get you deals like I was a coupon code." It made my skin crawl. Not because I needed them to stay mean, because mean at least is honest. It was the rewrite that got me. The way they tried to paste themselves into my story after refusing to show up for it. The final straw was the function room. Kyle's birthday. My mom insisted on doing something nice, which always means public. She booked a room at the local club. She told me to come early because she needed help with the slideshow. I almost laughed because that is literally my job, but okay. I showed up with my laptop anyway, ready to load whatever baby pictures she'd scraped for Facebook. When I got there, my dad was already holding court with Kyle's mates, talking about business, using words wrong, acting like he'd mentored me into success. Kyle was soaking it up, sipping beer like a king. Mom pulled me aside and said, "Just go along with it tonight," in that quiet voice that means we're about to ask you for something and we need you softened up. I asked what she meant. She said, "Your dad's going to make a little speech." I asked about what? She smiled too brightly and said, "About family." I should have left then. But my grandma was there. My grandma, who actually did support me. She was the only one who ever asked, "What are you working on?" and then listened. She'd slip me $20 when I was younger for petrol and wink like we shared a secret. When I got my first client, she said, "Good. Don't let anyone tell you it's not real." She'd come to my tiny market stall when I used to sell printed art and stand there like she was guarding a museum. I wasn't going to abandon her to the chaos. So I stayed. And I watched my dad take the mic and start telling the story where my success was a family achievement and my gratitude was due. I watched him pivot to helping Kyle like it was inevitable. I watched my mom nod as if my boundaries were a childish phase they could laugh through. I watched Kyle smirk because he thought the room would pressure me into compliance. And something in me finally snapped. Not into rage, but into clarity. If they wanted my life to be public when it benefited them, then the truth could be public too. I've been carrying those screenshots for months. Not for revenge, I told myself. For my own sanity. But on the drive there, I printed them. I don't know if that's healthy or unhinged. Maybe both. I put them in my bag, and I brought a remote because my mom had asked me to help with the slideshow, and I knew the projector would be set up. When I clicked and the first screenshot filled the screen, I felt my throat close up like I might choke. My brain screamed, "Stop, stop, stop," because little me is still terrified of my parents' anger. But my body stayed upright. I held the mic and didn't run. My dad stammered first. "What is this?" he demanded, voice cracking. "It's you," I said, and my voice shook now, but I didn't hide it. "It's you talking about me, about my work." Mom moved toward the laptop like she could physically undo it. "Turn it off," she hissed, eyes wild. Kyle stood up, face red. "Are you serious?" he snapped. You're trying to humiliate us? I looked out at the room, and my auntie's frozen mid-chew, and my cousin's eyebrows lifted at Kyle's friends suddenly fascinated by the carpet, and my grandma staring at the screen with her mouth slightly open. I hated that she was learning this way. I hated everything about it, but I also hated the years of being made small and private. I didn't come here to humiliate you, I said, and my voice steadied as I spoke because the words were true. I came here to celebrate Kyle, like everyone else. But Dad decided to use a microphone to pressure me into financing another one of Kyle's ventures. And Mom told me to go along with it. So no, I'm not going along with it. Dad's face was purple. We were joking, he snapped. That's taken out of context. I clicked to the next slide. Another screenshot. My mom again. Don't let her get too confident. She'll leave us behind. Under it, my dad. She needs to remember who she is. Under it, Kyle. Tell her not to come to my party if she's going to talk about work. Boring. A few people actually gasped at that one. Not dramatic gasps. More like the little involuntary inhale you do when something confirms what you suspected about someone. My mom's hands flew to her mouth. Tears instantly. Of course. She looked around like she wanted sympathy, like she wanted the room to punish me for being mean. Kyle pointed at me, voice loud. You're obsessed, he said. You saved messages from years ago just to attack us. My jaw clenched. No, I said. I saved them because every time I doubted myself, you all acted like I imagined the way you treated me. Dad lunged toward the laptop, and I stepped back instinctively, heart hammering. A club staff member near the door looked over, uncertain. My Aunt Karen, who usually avoids conflict like it's contagious, stood up slowly and said, Is this real, Mark? She said my dad's name like she'd never used it before, like Dad didn't fit him in that moment. Dad's eyes flicked to her, then away. He didn't answer, because lying would have been too obvious with his own words on the screen. My grandma's voice cut through, small but sharp. Why would you say that about her? She asked, staring at my mom. My grandma doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. The question landed heavier than yelling. Mom's face crumpled. We were stressed, she whispered, like stress explains cruelty. I could feel the room shifting. Not into a mob, not into some Hollywood takedown, just into reality. People seeing the pattern instead of the performance. I took a breath and lowered the mic slightly, so I wasn't booming anymore. I'm not asking you to hate them, I said to the room, because I could feel how tense everyone was. I'm not even asking you to pick sides. I'm done being used. I built my career without their support. I built it while being mocked, ignored, and treated like my work didn't matter until it could fund someone else's life. So no, I'm not paying for Kyle's business. I'm not redesigning things for free. I'm not being the family's secret weapon while being their punchline. My dad's voice shook with rage. After everything we've done for you, I cut him off, quiet but firm. You did the bare minimum parents are supposed to do, I said. You don't get to invoice me forever. Kyle grabbed his jacket, muttering swear words, and stormed out like a teenager. My mom sobbed and followed him, calling his name like he was the one who'd been harmed. Dad stood there for a few seconds, chest heaving, then shoved the mic onto the table so hard it clunked and stalked after them. The room didn't immediately relax. It just breathed. People looked at me like they didn't know what to do with me. My cousin Mia came up and touched my arm lightly and whispered, I'm sorry, and her eyes were glossy. My Aunt Karen sat back down slowly, like her bones hurt. A couple of Kyle's friends quietly left, not because they cared, but because drama wasn't on the itinerary. My grandma was still staring at the screen. I turned the projector off because it felt cruel to keep it glowing. Then I walked over to her, knees weak, and crouched beside her chair. Nana, I said softly, and my voice broke in a way it hadn't yet, because now there wasn't adrenaline to hold it up. I'm sorry you had to see that. She looked at me, really looked, and her eyes were wet. Don't you apologize, she whispered. You've been carrying that by yourself. That sentence, simple, true, nearly flattened me. I pressed my forehead briefly to her hand like I was trying to anchor myself. The aftermath wasn't neat. The next day, my mom texted me 37 messages in a row. Some were angry, some were sobbing, some were guilt. How could you do that to us? Do you know how embarrassing that was? Your father can't sleep. Kyle is devastated. You ruined his birthday. And underneath it all was the message they always send when they don't get what they want. You're cruel. Dad didn't text. He called. He left a voicemail that started with, "I don't even recognize you," and ended with, "Don't bother coming around if you're going to disrespect this family." As if respect is something you demand, not something you earn. Kyle posted a vague status about snakes in your own family and unfollowed me on everything, which, honestly, felt like someone taking a loud appliance out of my house. Peaceful. For a week, I barely ate. Not because I regretted saying no, but because my body was in that horrible post-conflict state where your brain keeps replaying every moment and imagining alternative versions where you were calmer, kinder, smaller. I woke up at 3 a.m. with my heart racing, checking my phone like I was waiting for punishment. I cried in the shower because it's the only place my nervous system still thinks is private. Then something strange happened. People started reaching out. Not hundreds, not viral, just real. My Aunt Karen asked to meet for coffee and said, "I'm sorry I didn't see it. I'm sorry I laugh along sometimes." My cousin Mia told me she'd started saving screenshots too because she'd watch how my family rewrote things and she didn't want to feel crazy anymore. My grandma called me twice in 1 week just to ask what I was working on and to tell me she was proud. And that did something to me. It didn't erase the hurt, but it reminded me I wasn't standing alone in space. My mom eventually called, quieter. No tears at first, just fatigue. "You didn't have to do it like that," she said. I sat on my couch, staring at the wall, and I could feel my hands start to sweat. "You didn't have to treat me like that," I replied. Silence. Then, very softly, "We thought you'd always come back," she admitted. Not "we're sorry." Not "we were wrong." Just that. An accidental confession that they'd built their lives assuming I would always fold. "I won't," I said. She made a small sound like pain. "So that's it? You're cutting us off?" I took a breath because this part matters. "I'm not cutting you off," I said. "I'm cutting off access to my money, my work, and my energy. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be one where I'm treated like a person, not like a resource." She didn't like that. I could hear it, but she didn't hang up. Dad took longer. He didn't apologize for weeks. When he finally did, it wasn't a movie apology. It was stiff and clipped and full of discomfort. "Your mother says I should say sorry," he muttered on the phone like the words tasted bad. I didn't mean it the way it looked. I almost laughed. I didn't. I just said, it looked like what it was. What regret looks like now is boring, and that's why it's real. Kyle's sneaker thing fizzled because it turns out optimism isn't a business plan. My parents had to actually face the fact that Kyle is not a helpless child, but an adult who makes choices. They stopped calling me for money because the answer stayed no. They stopped offering my services to people like I was a family discount card because I told them once that if I heard my name used that way again, I'd stop answering their calls altogether. At the next family gathering, my dad didn't take the mic. He didn't make speeches. He didn't make little jokes at my expense. He barely looked at me at first, like he was afraid I'd expose him again. My mom hovered, awkward, trying too hard. My grandma squeezed my hand under the table like she was grounding me. And me? I felt different. Not triumphant. Not smug. Just taller inside my own body. Like I wasn't bracing for impact every time I walked into a room with my family. Because the real success wasn't the money or the clients or the recognition. It was the moment I stopped begging for their approval. It was the moment I let them feel the consequence of ignoring me. They no longer got the version of me who built their comfort for free. I know some people will read this and think I'm petty for putting those screenshots up. Maybe I am. I can live with that more easily than I can live with being silently diminished for the rest of my life. They ignored my efforts for years because it was convenient. They dismissed me because it kept the family hierarchy neat. Dad in charge, Mom smoothing, Kyle being protected, me being useful. The night I clicked that remote, I didn't just show receipts. I showed them I wasn't going to play my assigned role anymore. And yes, watching their faces change when the room saw the truth, that was ugly satisfaction. I won't pretend it wasn't. But the deeper relief came later On an ordinary Tuesday, when my phone rang and it wasn't a demand, it was my grandma asking, "What are you making this week, love?" And me answering without that old tightness in my chest. That's what power looks like for me now. Not control, not revenge fantasies, just the quiet, steady ability to say no and mean it even when the whole room is watching.